All right, so I was looking at my YouTube feed the other day, and I had to smile. Why? Because I got this little thing in my notifications, Myth Vision podcast. Uh-oh is right. He's got Alex Malpas on, who's one of the smartest atheists in town, by the way. You know, Alex Malpas decimates presuppositional apologetics. Uh-oh is right. Well, you know, I had to chuckle, had to smile. I had to smile a little inside. Why? Because Presup is, the more I study the issue, the more I think about what is entailed under the whole entire banner of presuppositional apologetics, the more I realize that they ain't going nowhere. They're only going to get stronger and more resolute. Why? Because there's a whole basket of philosophical arguments that could easily be placed under the banner of presuppositional apologetics that have yet to come to fruition. They're very, very, very strong arguments, and they heavily favor the theists. There's practically going to be no way for the atheists to answer these arguments, and they're coming down the pike. And I'll prove it to you in this video. So I can't wait to see what Alex Malpas is going to say. There's no way on earth presuppositional apologetics is invalid, and there's no way on earth it is going anywhere. So let's examine. It's only going to get stronger and more resolute. Now, I understand that the reason why it has such a bad reputation, most of the people who do it actually don't understand the philosophy either. The philosophy, evidentiary apologetics, I may have said this in another video, it's worth repeating, is really easy to understand. There's nothing to understand. You saw the magnum opus book of the Facts of the Resurrection. What's that guy's name? Minimal Facts for the Resurrection, whatever. The thing they were looking at, Shannon and Paul G were going through. Okay, what's hard to understand about that? These are the facts. You know, Jesus died on a cross. These people saw. There's nothing to not understand. Evidentiary apologetics is really simple and really straightforward. The problem is, as I've reiterated in other videos, and I won't go through it again, is that the thing you are trying to evidence for stands outside of the purview of empirical investigation. God, if he exists, is transcendent, immaterial, hence not available for empirical investigation, hence not subject to evidentiary apologetics entirely. The other problem is you have to examine the presuppositions of the person in front of you, because if they're bringing to the table, as was the case with Shannon and Paul G, they went over the minimal facts book, resurrection book, the magnum opus book, Gary Habermas. They weren't working very hard to not believe in the resurrection based off of the facts that he was offering. Why? Because they start out with the presupposition, the supernatural does not occur. That's resolute inside of both of them. So you have to work really hard to get them to even acknowledge the reality of the supernatural before you begin presenting any evidence. Why? Because there's no point otherwise. They weren't working very hard. They weren't. They weren't cracking a sweat. They weren't like, you know, we didn't have them up against the wall. And they were dodging. Sometimes you see atheists, you know, hem and haw and dodge, and it's really obvious. They weren't. They didn't believe in the resurrection. They looked through his evidences. They didn't move the needle at all. Now, the other thing, evidentiary apologetics and presuppositional apologetics should not be in separate categories. A comprehensive apologetic should take both into account. The most famous, I've said this before, again, it's worth repeating. The most famous evidentiary apologist by far is who? William Lane Craig, okay? And what is his most famous argument? Do not say Kalam. Kalam! I said do not say Kalam. Kalam! No. Okay, fine. Kalam is his most famous argument, Craig. Gotcha. Okay, fine. Kalam is his most famous argument. What is his second most famous argument? The argument for morals, objective morality, which, as I pointed out, could easily be reconfigured as a transcendental deduction, hence fall under the banner of presuppositional apologetics. A necessary precondition of objective morality is God. We have objective morality, therefore God. X is a necessary precondition of Y, therefore X. Can easily be reconfigured as a transcendental deduction, hence it's presuppositional apologetics. Furthermore, to even more strongly evidence the case I'm making, one of the most famous debates, apologetics debates of all time, was William Lane Craig versus Sam Harris. The entire debate could fall under the banner of presuppositional apologetics. Why? The entire debate is asking of Sam Harris, you believe in objective morals, correct? Yes, correct. You're an atheist, correct? Okay, how do you justify that position? Remember what I said presuppositional apologetics is always about. And they trace back to Kant. There's more to it than that, but that's the general idea. If If you want to start with Kant, that's a good place to start. Justifications of knowledge claims. Remember the question I told Stephanie's going to ask you. What is the status of abstract objects given atheism? What is the status of abstract, what'd you say, Stephanie? What is the status of abstract objects given atheism? What is the status of abstract objects given atheism? How do you justify your belief in the transcendent and immaterial as an atheist? Really hard to do. Really hard to do. For example, with this famous debate, William Lane Craig versus Sam Harris, he was being called on as an atheist to justify his belief in objective morality. And to tell you the truth, he wasn't all that successful. Why? Because again, I think even William Lane Craig, I just recently rewatched parts of it because I realized that it was exactly what I was talking about. It's worth checking out, but I'm pretty sure William Lane Craig even brought this up in his opening statement. Okay, the famous phrase from Richard Dawkins that I've said a lot now. There is no good, there is no evil, there is only blind, pitiless indifference as we dance to the music of our DNA. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the gist of it. Why is that such a justifiably famous sentence? Because it is 100% consistent with atheism. It is 100% consistent with atheism. If matter in motion is all there is, then he's correct. There is no good, there is no evil, there is no justification for the categories good and evil. When a lion eats a zebra, it is amoral. We don't even flinch. We don't go, oh my God, he's so mean. Sometimes he is mean. Sometimes he tortures the thing. Like a sweet little cat. Sometimes tortures a mouse. I mean, we've never found a mouse in the apartment, but if she found one, God forbid, my sweet little angel cat turns into a predator just like that and tortures the poor thing before she eats it. She's evil. No, she's not evil. Why? Because there is no good, there is no evil. Now, that is completely and 100% consistent with atheism. The problem for the atheist is not consistent at all with the world as it actually occurs. So the burden now falls on the atheist. Remember, they're always trying to say, you're the one making a positive claim, Craig. You're the one making a positive claim. I'm not always. There's only one time where that is an appropriate thing to say to me. Other than that, you are trying to cheat. You're trying to win debates automatically, by default, before they begin. Why? Democrat and Republican sit down to have a discussion. If the Democrat gets to say to the Republican, you're the one making the positive claim, now the burden of proof falls on him. Guess who's going to win 80 to 90% of those debates? The Democrat. Why? All he has to do is ask him questions. Justify Trump. Justify this. Justify Trump. So it's a way that the atheists have been trying to cheat. The only time where it's actually true is if we're having a debate and I'm bringing a formal argument that says this proves God. Then I'm making a positive claim. This proves God. Other than that, no. There's burdens of justification that falls on both sides. You're an atheist, okay? Again, Stephanie asks you, what is the status of abstract object given atheism? How do you justify? You believe in objective morality? Some of you don't. Okay, that's fine. Then you don't have any justification. Why? Because it's consistent with atheism. If you say matter and motion is all there is, it's consistent with atheism. If you say, like Richard Dawkins, there is no good, there is no evil, that's consistent with atheism. So there's no justification there. The only justification that will come is I say, well, then what about this? For example, as I pointed out, before I get to that, do you understand so far? If you say I'm an atheist and I believe in objective morality, a la Sam Harris, now you have a burden of justification a la Sam Harris. The entire debate was that. And to tell you the truth, he wasn't all that successful. Why? He didn't really understand the is-ought distinction. How do you derive an ought from an is? These empirically are the facts. They do not tell us what ought to be the case. See, truthfully, he didn't really think about the is-ought distinction all that clearly. Sam Harris is a bright guy, but he's not well-versed enough in philosophy. He kind of sidestepped the whole thing. It didn't seem like he clearly even understood what the is-ought distinction was. When he started talking about oughts, it was weird. But the basic gist, now, I to some degree, I empathize with the main point Sam Harris was making. I've heard him make it on other videos. I think he made it to Jordan Peterson. They were talking about morals on a thing I just watched. So one of the arguments he was making, okay, which I empathize with, I think it's essentially correct. And it's probably what motivated the book, because I've heard him say this story more than once, is that he was talking to one of these were the days pre-woke. So this person wasn't quite woke, but was going to be eventually someone on like Obama's team of bioethics or some Yeah, exactly. Rolling my eyes too. Rolling my eyes, Craig. Yeah, I understand. So I. I know where this is going. So do I. She wasn't exactly woke, but she was pretty much, nowadays she'd be insufferably woke. And he was talking about, this is a bioethicist, this is a person with a finely tuned sense of right and wrong in almost any other context. And he starts saying to her, the Taliban are really basically evil, how they treat women. And she won't bite the bullet. She won't bite the apple. Do you understand why? Well, who are we to say? Who are we to judge their culture? That's exactly the position she took with him. It blew his mind. And that's why he wrote the book. Because he was looking for some sort of extra justification. He believes in objective morality, which so do I. And he believes in objective morality because he drew the right inference. I objectively can say that what the Taliban do to women is evil. That's his argument in the book. They force you to put a bag on your head, and if you don't wear the bag, they splash battery acid all over your face to punish you. Okay, that's objectively evil. That's what he's saying. Therefore, it automatically and logically follows that objective morals and values exist. Why? Because I see objective evil in this culture. But the cultural relatives chick, the wokester, isn't willing to call them evil. Why? I guess because they're, darker skinned than us. We can't say that. We can't say that they're evil. And he wanted to find a way to argue with her, to prove to her the case. So, but then he was being called on by William Lane Craig. Now, in the context of that cultural relativistic stance, he's 100% correct. We can decide good and evil. But what William Lane Craig was asking was a different question. Okay, how do you justify good and evil given atheism? Because you have to look to something else other than what? The empirical facts. Why? You cannot derive an ought from an is. If you memorize nothing else from my videos, memorize that, write it on your wall. Why? It's insightful. You cannot derive an ought from an is. It can be used in a lot of different contexts to really, really give you insight into how valuable this whole line of inquiry actually is going to prove for the theist. Why? Because it's always true. If there are transcendent categories, and there are transcendent categories as provable fact, if there are abstract objects and there are abstract objects as provable fact, it is really hard to consistently justify them given atheism. Why? Because they do not reduce to physical properties. Bang, just like that. They don't. They don't reduce at all. So, going back to, if Sam Harris is correct and Richard Dawkins is correct, let's go to Richard Dawkins because he's more consistent with atheism. Says we dance to the music of our DNA. So human beings are just essentially animals. Okay, if they're essentially animals, who are we to care that the stronger animal says to the weaker animal, put this bag on your face, or what? Or beat you, or else. But who are we to care? When the lion eats the zebra, do we care? No. Why? He's dancing to the music of his DNA. He's hungry. The zebra is satisfyingly delicious, I'm sure. The zebra's walking around looking delicious. Okay, there's no difference. Dawkins is correct. If atheism were true, there's no way to justify the difference. Sam Harris is having a moral intuition that he's wrestling with, and I applaud him for that. He's correct. There's something wrong here. Something doesn't seem right, Craig. I understand that. You're correct in your intuition. It is, objectively speaking, evil. That woman rebels against having the bag on her face, and you get mad at her and pour acid all over her. I've seen those pictures. You ever see those videos or those photos of the woman who wouldn't submit? Horrifying. Objectively evil. Absolutely, as far as I'm concerned. And any of you moral relativists, go look at the picture of the woman who's been scarred by battery acid and tell me that's not objectively wrong. I dare you. Really try to justify there's no objectively evil thing. Go look at her face and turn around and tell me that's not objectively wrong, because it is. His moral intuitions are correct. The only thing is, how do we justify his moral intuitions? How does he turn around in good faith as an atheist? I'm an atheist and I think this is wrong. Great. Justify the position. I agree with you that it's wrong. Now give me a justification for it. You see the issue here? And it was really hard for Sam Harris to do. Why? Because he doesn't understand the is-ought distinction, didn't really think about it all that much. Tell you the God's honest truth. You bring these arguments to the table correctly, and you will put, you don't have to, the reason why presuppositional apologetics, again, this is also important. Why it has such a bad reputation is people trying to trap people through something other than the quality of the argument. And they don't understand the argument and the philosophy. The famous person, obviously everyone knows, Dawkins. How do you justify your belief in the necessary, whatever he says. You do not have to roll up on someone and be all manly man. You don't. If you construct the argument correctly, the argument is the trap. And if you construct the argument correctly, it is for the atheist to struggle with, how do I justify this given atheism? There are atheist moral realists out there. You tell me how they justify the position. I've never seen an actual, relevant, pertinent, useful justification for the position. I've heard them say they're moral realists, just like I heard Sam Harris say it. And he explained why. And I agree with the inferences there, and I agree with his emotions there. But that doesn't justify the position. That's a very big, distinct difference. And the justification is where it's going to be a struggle. So the one that I've already brought up. And there is going to be a way to resolve this. This is why these arguments aren't going anywhere. As soon as people understand them and unpack them correctly, they're going to get even more powerful and resolute. Why? Because there is ultimately no answer. Precondition of intelligibility. Matt Dillahunty told us in a video that I haven't analyzed yet, but I will. He has two assumptions at least that he brings to the table. One, laws of logic, and two, the reality of the external world. In both situations, he didn't use these words, but this is explaining why those assumptions he holds to. Laws of logic, he said, if I want to make good arguments, valid arguments, if I want to use the laws of logic, I have to assume the laws of logic in order to use them, and they're the tools of inference to make valid arguments. Correct. And the other one, he said, if the bus is coming towards me, I have to decide, is that bus really there? I could die if I decide incorrectly. So he's forced to decide in both instances based on what? Necessary, ding, 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 precondition of intelligibility. They are necessary preconditions of intelligibility. That is why he decides to adopt those assumptions. He has to, in order to function clearly and not chaotically in the world as it actually occurs. He has to decide right then and there, these are the necessary preconditions of intelligibility. He's in a debate. If he wants to say that's not valid, why isn't it valid? You just said, the squirrel is a truck. That's not valid according to the law of identity. A squirrel is not a truck. A squirrel cannot be a truck. Who told you about these laws of identity? So he has to assume them, that they are true and valid in order to use them. Necessary precondition of intelligibility. In order to unpack arguments correctly. Tell us where logical fallacies is. And then when he's in a situation where he's got to decide on the reality of the external world, why? Because otherwise he may get killed. Necessary precondition of intelligibility. Okay, now let's go back to one of the arguments I presented, and I'll show you how this is a well-placed trap for an atheist. What did I say this is just one argument, guys. And any atheist wants to challenge me in the comment section, go for it. Not by insulting. You're so stupid, Greg. That's not challenging me in the comments. You're such an idiot. Can't believe this idiot's still making videos. Okay, that's not challenging me. Challenge the argument. I don't see how you get out of the trap. The trap doesn't need to be presented to someone in person, and I don't need to roll up on anyone, be all manly man and tough guy. I really don't. Thank God. Why? Because I'm tougher than anyone out there. Promise. I can be pretty bad. I can be convincingly badass. I really can. Remember, I'm from New York, son. Doubt me? You want to get knocked out? Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think so. Stand down. That wasn't convincingly badass, Craig. All right, fine. I was just playing around Saturday morning. Okay, here's the well-constructed argument. This is just the first one out of 50. And all these arguments are going to favor the theist. Why? Because it's really hard to justify given atheism. I change it to reductive materialists. Okay, reductive materialists, it becomes really obvious what I'm talking about. Atheists, there might be atheists who have other ways to reconcile. I'm not leaving out that possibility. So if you're an atheist and you're philosophically minded, chill out, relax. I'm not saying it's impossible. You will have your chance to justify. Go watch the William Lane Craig versus Sam Harris and see if you could justify objective morality given atheism. Maybe you can. I haven't seen it yet, but maybe you can. So reductive materialists, let's keep it simple. Reductive materialists. Why? Because the things don't reduce. Does not reduce. So a necessary precondition of a civil society is what? Transcendent morality and concepts like basic human rights. A necessary, what did I say? Necessary precondition of a civil society. I didn't say an optional. If there is a society that doesn't guarantee your basic human rights, you do not want to live there, and neither do I. Why? Because it is a necessary precondition of a civil society. That's why it's enshrined in our Declaration of Independence. We believe these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, or I forget the exact wording. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All men are endowed by their Creator with these inalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Is that right? I think that's right. Enshrined in the Constitution, grounded in God. Why? Because the only way they can be intrinsic is if they're grounded in God. If they're ideas according to man, guess what? They aren't intrinsic. Why? Because the next man can come around and go, hey, I got a better idea. Instead of basic human rights, why don't we say, I have all the rights? I don't like that idea. Well, too bad, because I'm in charge now. Okay, so it's enshrined in God is another way of saying intrinsic. Intrinsic. Because if God is given the rights, God is the only one who can revoke the rights. Intrinsic. It's another way of saying actually they're intrinsic. They're a social construct. Guess what? The next society that comes along could be Nazi Germany and say, no, we reject these rights for Jews. Matter of fact, we'll go one step further. Jews don't have any rights. Matter of fact, we'll go even one step further. Jews, round them all up and throw them in concentration camps. Why? Because they have zero rights. Okay. So that society wasn't very civil. Why? Because it wasn't grounded. The necessary precondition wasn't laid there. Basic human rights. Had they had basic human rights, the Jews could have objected. Hey, we're humans just like you. Hath not a Jew eyes? That's a famous thing from Shakespeare. We're humans just like you. How dare you round us up? We have our basic human rights. And they'd have to look at their document, their founding document. Well, I guess they're right according to our founding document. You see how it works? Necessary precondition of a civil society, basic human rights. Now, as a reductive materialist, you have two options. Actually, you're trapped. You're basically trapped. Why? A universal ought. This ought to be the case in all societies, in all places. Transcends cultures. It transcends cultures. This ought to be the case for all societies all over the world. They should have basic human rights. Otherwise, the people in charge are just going to treat anybody however they want, and it's not going to be good for the population. Okay, you're a reductive materialist. Let's keep it simple. How do you justify that? You can't. Why? Universal ought, you cannot derive an ought from an is. It is not a physical thing. It is not found in the physical properties. You can't empirically verify for it. They are rights transcendent. They are an idea prior to the conception of the society. Prior. Which means, how do you justify given reductive materialism? You can't. That's the point. That's why these arguments are coming and they're coming with force. Why? And they put the atheist, done correctly. The whole point of the argument is to put the atheist on their back heels. Okay? That's why they're getting a bad rap from the atheists. Why? Because they cry like little girls. I don't want to be on my back heels. I understand that. Nobody does. I really don't want to. I understand. Stephanie, you're not atheist. I don't know, but I don't want to be on my back heels either. Okay, fine, Stephanie. No one's putting in the back heels. Every time I do a female voice, it sounds mysteriously like Stephanie. I don't know how to correct that. I don't know how to account for that. Okay, and most of the people who do these arguments do them improperly. They are supposed to be arguments to challenge the atheist, to examine your presuppositions and your assertions. Are you like Matt Dillahunty? I assume that you assume both of those two things that Matt Dillahunty does. If you don't, you got to work on your epistemology. Why? Because he's 100% correct. He assumes the laws of logic and he assumes the reality of the external world. Why? Necessary precondition of intelligibility. Couldn't function properly otherwise. Now we go back to basic human rights. It's assumption, a universal ought prior to the founding of the civil society. Necessary precondition of the civil society. The Nazi Germany did not have that in their founding documents. Hence, they could do whatever they want. They could change the laws however they felt, and they changed the laws to evil laws to outlaw Jews. That's what they did. Nuremberg, 1933, Nuremberg laws. They changed the laws, guys. So it's a necessary precondition of a civil society. Okay, so we're in agreement there, I hope, with everybody listening. Are all in agreement. Now you're an atheist or a reductive materialist, keep it simple. How do you justify that? Can't. Why? It's not found in physical properties. It doesn't reduce to physical properties at all. That's the point. That's the point. Now, let's see, 24 minutes. This is not terrible. I've got to wrap it up a little earlier than normal. I can't wait to watch Alex Malpas. I really honestly can't wait to watch and see what he's going to say. Why? Because he's the smartest guy in town. As far as atheists go, he's top echelon in terms of, top shelf in terms of clarity of thought. Clarity of thought. I've heard him summarize Immanuel Kant in like 5 sentences, and it's like, really, really clear, correct summary. So it'll be interesting to see how he takes on presuppositional apologetics. I can promise you ahead of time, the reason why I made this video before I watched what he's going to do, that thing's coming out in 2 days. By the time you heard this video, I may have watched it, but when I'm making this video, I haven't watched it yet. I just saw it in the notifications this morning, so it's coming out in 2 days. Why am I making this video ahead of time? Because I promise you on pain of death, he isn't going to be able to do it. Smartest guy in town is not going to be able to debunk presuppositional apologetics. Why? Because what I just said is what they actually are. I don't care how it's being misused by anybody under the sun, anybody out there. What I just said is the building blocks of what they are actually useful for. And they're a necessary precondition of a successful apologetic. Why? Because you have to challenge the atheist to some degree. You can't just present your gay little evidences. Your evidences are gay, let's get real. I'm sorry, I'm kidding. You can't just present your weak little evidences. Why? Because they're not going to accept it. They're not. They start out with a presupposition resolute. The supernatural does not occur. That's why they so willingly dismiss any supernatural phenomena. They dismiss even supernatural phenomena that they have had. I've heard them say this. If I believed I have had these numerous experiences that if I believed in the supernatural, I could easily count as supernatural. So why don't you? Because I've ruled out the supernatural as a possibility prior to engaging with your content, you dumb theist. You get it? You have to get at the presuppositions first. And you have to force the atheist to acknowledge or at least see that they have a lot of assumptions that they carry around, the ones that they carry around that they can justify, a la Matt Dillahunty, that they've thought through, laws of logic and the reality of the external world. And that's what it's ultimately going to boil down to. This is only going to get stronger and more resolute, I promise you, because I think I have a roadmap for a complete and utter comprehensive apologetic. I really think I do. I really think I do. When you just go further, okay? What are the assumptions that are valid? The ones that we need to, necessary preconditions. What are the assumptions that are not valid? Ones that we don't need to, you don't, if you don't have to assume something, you don't. Why? That's called prejudice or bias. Bias, really. If you don't have to assume something, if it's not a necessary precondition of intelligibility, then you don't assume it. Why? Because you're making a mistake. Who assumes things that aren't necessary? No, someone who's, it's not valid. The only time you can ever justify an assumption is if it's a necessary precondition of intelligibility. So the roadmap ahead, and I'll tell you this ahead of time, why? Because I don't think it can be argued against. I honestly don't. I think it's going to be a comprehensive and game-changing apologetic. Is you just pull out each, the reason why it never works when people present it. Works when Jay Dyer presents it sometimes. His philosophy is correct usually. It's, you know, there may be errors in there, but I don't know where they are. His overall philosophical package that he presents is usually correct and insightful and worth listening to. The critique they always say is that he doesn't actually chisel it down to a simple argument, which is probably valid. I don't know. The point is, I'm pretty sure looking down the football field that I can actually siphon out, based off necessary preconditions of intelligibility, anything you are assuming that is not necessary to assume, you're not valid to assume it. Why? It's a bias. It's not an assumption that is needed. The only time you are justified in making an assumption is when it is a necessary precondition of intelligibility. So what I'm going to do is try to unpack where those things actually are. And then I can adjudicate it properly between an atheist and a Christian. Why? Because we both live in the same world, guys. We both live in the same world as it actually occurs. So it shouldn't be all game-changingly impossible to construct a completely valid epistemology. This is necessary for us to assume in order to function in the world as it actually occurs. This isn't. So we can jettison that, but we have to hold to that. Just like with the laws of logic and the reality of the external world. We can hold to the laws of logic, hold to the reality of the external world. Why? Because we have to. So there you have it, kids. Maybe that's a lot, Craig. You gave us a lot. I understand I gave you a lot, but, you know, get ready. Because I really think, you know, this is good. I can't wait to watch Alex Malpas. I almost guarantee you, I almost promise you on pain of death, he's going to misrepresent tons of it. And that's why he's going to think he's got the jump on it. You know, if you base it off a weak, if you base your idea of what presuppositional apologetics is off of a weak apologist, you're going to not understand what it actually is. Why? Because they are misusing these arguments. They aren't using them correctly because they don't really understand them. What I'm doing is unpacking them correctly and presenting them clearly and concisely. Go watch the William Lane Craig versus Sam Harris debate if you do not believe me. That was basically presuppositional apologetics in action. I believe God is a necessary precondition of my belief in objective morality. You're an atheist. You justify your belief in objective morality given atheism. Sam Harris struggled to do it. He didn't even understand the roadmap to doing it correctly. Go watch. You don't believe me. Go watch. So there you have it, kids. You know, can't wait to watch Alex Malpas. It's gonna get really interesting. So with that, I will wrap up another slam dunk of a video. Mass has ended. Slam dunk. The video's slam dunk. You kidding me? Where you get content like this? This is just off the top. I just rolled out of bed. Saturday morning, rolled out of bed. This is just off the top of my head. Didn't even write anything down. Just blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Great insight. Blah, blah, blah. Thank you. Blah, blah, blah. Great insight. I didn't ask. Blah, 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 blah. Great insight. I didn't ask. Thanks. Didn't ask. Blah, 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 blah. Great insight. Greg. Another great insight. I didn't ask. I'm not asking. I understand that. I'm fully aware of that. Blah, 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 blah. Just rolling out of bed. Running my mouth off. It's what I do. So, there you have it, kids. That is all for now. Mass has ended. Go in peace. Amen.